And joining us now with more on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's trip to the United States is host of ILTV's Insider, Steve Leibovitz, and Ari Harrow, the former chief of staff for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So, Steve, turning to you. Before we get started, Insider airs tonight. What's in store for us this week?
Well, first of all, we have more of Ari Harrow, former director of the Prime Minister's office, and a man who's been to meetings with presidents, including President Obama. And he shares with us some of his perceptions of what the Prime Minister is heading for. We also have Professor Yedidia Stern from the Jewish People's Policy Institute, who has what I think, and Ari, I think, agreed with me, has a pretty interesting idea about a solution for the whole judicial reform issue. He calls it a thin constitution, and we go into both issues.
Sounds interesting. Now, Ari, turning to you, glad to have you back on the show. Netanyahu's trip to the United States, he's set to finally meet with U.S. President Joe Biden. What's on the agenda? What do you think he's hoping to achieve with this meeting?
So it's great to see you, Lidar, and I think that while it's the first time they're meeting as President and Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Biden have had a relationship for over 40 years. There's a lot of history, there's a deep understanding and a deep friendship between the two of them. So I don't think they're going to have to waste much time on niceties, and they're going to get right into the real issues. While some of the political issues we face here in Israel will be brought up in the meeting, ultimately the Prime Minister is going to focus on the two things that are most important to him and have been from day one of his return to the Prime Minister's office. And that is peace with Saudi Arabia and dealing with the Iranian nuclear threat.
Now, I think as Steve mentioned, you've sat in on meetings with the Prime Minister and President Obama at the time. You said they're going to dispense with the niceties, but still, it's no secret that there has been, a rocky relationship between the Biden administration and Netanyahu. So do you think that there's going to be some issues there? I mean, is the U.S. president going to be open to hearing what Netanyahu has to say in spite of sort of this rocky relationship?
So I think rocky relationships are nothing new to Prime Minister Netanyahu when it comes to the U.S. administration. Going back to his first term in office, he worked with President Clinton, and there were numerous stories back then as far as how they had worked together. The Obama-Netanyahu time in office is something that I write extensively in my book that's coming out in a few months, My Brother's Keeper. And there was definitely tension within that relationship. And I think that this is sort of par for the course when it comes to Netanyahu and U.S. presidents. And partly because Netanyahu has stuck to his guns when it comes to Israel's interests vis-a-vis security, vis-a-vis dealing with the Palestinians. And I think that you're going to see a continuation of the same.
Mm-hmm. Now, Netanyahu has wanted a peace deal with Saudi Arabia, as you mentioned, from day one for a long time. It's something he's envisioned when many people said it would be impossible. Do you think he's really ready to make the concessions that are necessary, especially given his current coalition? Is he ready to make these concessions, especially towards the Palestinians, for example?
Well, I think concessions towards the Palestinians are going to be challenging. Something that Netanyahu has successfully implemented in the Abraham Accords is that a Palestinian peace will come after regional peace. And the reason being that terror is not going to bring about Israeli capitulation, but rather peace is going to bring to peace in the region. And Netanyahu was successful with the UAE, with Bahrain, with Morocco, etc. And therefore, I think that the Saudi peace is important to him. It's important from an economic perspective. It's important on the most pressing issue, which is Iranians' nuclear capabilities. And I think that he will do what he can to bring about that peace, while at the same time saving the Palestinian peace as much as he can for a later date.
Does it make his message tougher to convey when there are protests outside, protests by pro-government people, but they're anti-government people outside? Not what Netanyahu would like to see outside while he's inside meeting with the president in New York.
No question. There's no question that those are not sites that make his job easier. And I think that that is what the protesters are trying to accomplish. At the same time, I do think that the fact that there are such vibrant protests, both in Israel and now in the United States, do speak to the strength of the Israeli democracy.
Well, that's kind.
Yeah.
You're not attacking them or cursing them.
Well, I'm a big believer in the democratic rights of everyone to protest, and I think that ultimately in true dictatorships around the world, you don't see any protests for good reason. I think that the fact that there are protests both there and here do speak to the strength of Israeli democracy. It's not what he would want to see, but ultimately his focus is not going to be there.
And I do want to ask, we've just heard today of a new peace deal that's come forward, of Saudi and EU-backed peace deal. This has certainly taken the Prime Minister by surprise. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that the Palestinian peace within any type of regional agreement definitely makes Netanyahu's position much more, I would say, complicated. It's not something that his partners within the coalition can agree with, but I'll give you a little, little inside information. It's not something that he or his party, the Likud party, could go ahead with either. We have tried on the Palestinian front in the past with the disengagement from Gaza, with certain withdrawals from Judea and Samaria. There was Israeli withdrawals from Palestinian cities. And historically, and this is something Netanyahu has repeated over and over again, any withdrawal brings about a rise in Palestinian terror. And we've faced terrible Palestinian terror over the last 9 months, and this is definitely not the time that you want to be making concessions or capitulating to those on that side.
And Steve, I want to turn to you for a second, looking back as well on Netanyahu's meeting with Elon Musk. This was quite an interesting meeting. It was live on X, formerly known as Twitter. What do you think Netanyahu got out of this meeting? What was his intention to meet with Musk in the first place?
Well, it filled up some time on the way to New York, although I will say that Musk made a trip to New York to see the president of Turkey, Erdogan, whereas Bibi had to fly all the way to, which city is it in California?
San Jose.
San Jose, in order to meet with Musk. He wanted to, definitely wanted to discuss the issue of AI. It is very important to Netanyahu. Netanyahu can speak about the issue on a very, very high level, I've learned, which is kind of surprising. I mean, he has a lot of other issues to deal with. Very important for him. He wants some of the business dealing with AI in the future to come to Israel. I think he also wanted the platform that Musk owns. He wanted to appear live, millions of people. These are the days, I'm told, of social media. People don't read newspapers anymore. They listen to social media, and that's where Elon Musk is.
All right, and Ari, so final thought from you. What does Netanyahu have to do to make this a successful trip, in your opinion?
I think that Netanyahu shines on the international stage, and this is the pinnacle, the diplomatic pinnacle of his annual calendar. So his speech at the UN will undoubtedly be a powerful speech. We've seen that year after year after year. He most likely will do some domestic media in the United States, which he once again is the greatest spokesman of the State of Israel. And I think that ultimately the photo ops that he has with President Biden, with Zelensky, with Erdogan, and even the one with Musk, ultimately send a very strong message both to the international community that he is a very significant player, remains a significant player, and to the people back in Israel that he is still the Netanyahu of old in the eyes of the world.
All right, Ari Harrow, Steve Leibovitz, thank you so much for joining us.